6 empty chairs. That is the image now on the front page of every major newspaper in the world. 6 empty chairs surrounding a table originally prepared for 7 world leaders. 6 national flags standing unattended, and 1 president seated alone in silence while 5 of America's closest allies walked out of the room together. What happened at this year's G7 summit did not unfold behind closed doors. It happened in front of cameras, in front of the world, and in less than 4 minutes. This is the Global Report. Tonight, we take you inside the room where the Western Alliance cracked open in public. Before we go further, we want to hear from you. If one country tried to control who belongs at an international summit, would you call that leadership or overreach? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Tell us where you are writing from. We read every response. The G7 was built on a single principle. 7 of the world's most powerful democracies sitting together as equals, regardless of economic size or military strength. No hierarchy. No veto. No single nation with the authority to decide who belongs at the table. That principle lasted more than half a century. It did not survive this summit. According to multiple diplomatic sources now speaking from Europe, North America, and Asia, the crisis began at approximately 8:45 in the morning on the second day of meetings. Prime Minister Mark Carney and his Canadian delegation arrived at the scheduled working session and found the entrance blocked. American security personnel and members of the White House advance team were positioned outside the conference room. Canadian officials were informed that the Prime Minister would not be permitted to participate in the session. No formal vote had been held. No written procedural justification was provided. No warning had been given. The Canadian delegation remained standing in the hallway while the other leaders entered and took their seats inside. Then cameras inside the room captured the moment that changed everything. The President addressed the assembled leaders and declared that Canada would not be participating in the session. He then described the gathering as America's table and suggested the United States would decide who should be included in future discussions. The room shifted immediately. Every leader present understood what those words meant. If one nation could remove another member without agreement from the group, then every country sitting at that table faced the possibility that their own participation could someday depend on political approval from Washington. For several minutes, no one moved. Then the French president pushed back his chair. He stood up and addressed the remaining leaders. According to witnesses, he warned that if one country could be removed at another nation's discretion, then no leader present was truly sitting at the table as an equal. Then he walked out. What happened next took less than 4 minutes. Germany's chancellor stood and followed. Japan's prime minister rose next. Italy's leader gathered his papers and joined the walkout. And then, the prime minister of the United Kingdom, America's closest traditional ally in the room, also stood and walked out. 5 nations. 4 minutes. 1 empty table. Television viewers around the world watched the conference room empty in real time. One diplomatic correspondent described the atmosphere as less like a disagreement and more like the visible collapse of decades of alliance management happening in front of a live camera. But the summit hallway produced a second moment that is now spreading just as widely. Cameras positioned outside the conference room captured the 5 leaders who had walked out gathering together in conversation. And then Mark Carney walked out of a side corridor and joined them. 6 leaders standing together in a hallway, speaking privately, shaking hands, while photographers documented every exchange and the world watched through live feeds. A reporter asked Carney for his reaction. He paused briefly, then said he was not the central story of the day. He gestured toward the leaders standing beside him and directed attention toward the allied governments that had chosen to leave the session in solidarity. We want to ask you directly. If you were one of those leaders inside that room, would you have stayed at the table and tried to negotiate? Or would you have walked out alongside the others? Tell us in the comments below. The rest of the summit collapsed rapidly. Scheduled working sessions were postponed. Bilateral meetings fell into confusion. And for the first time in more than half a century, the G7 failed to produce a joint communiqué. Instead, 6 nations drafted and released their own declaration. It affirmed the principle of sovereign equality within international institutions. It stated that no single country should possess unilateral authority over membership or participation in the G7 framework. The United States did not sign it. Financial markets responded within hours. The dollar fell against several major international currencies. Bond markets experienced significant volatility. Major financial institutions issued warnings that prolonged instability among G7 governments could weaken confidence in future economic coordination. The concern extends far beyond symbolism. The G7 has historically served as the central forum where advanced economies coordinate responses to inflation, recessions, trade disputes, and financial shocks. If trust inside that institution breaks down, the effects move through international banking systems, supply chains, investment planning, and global regulatory cooperation simultaneously. Diplomatic reaction overseas was swift and pointed. European officials questioned whether the confrontation reflected a broader shift in American foreign policy toward unilateral decision-making. Asian allies expressed concern about the reliability of long-standing partnerships. Several governments privately asked the same question. If Canada could be excluded from a major alliance forum this abruptly, which nation would be next? Inside the United States, the political reaction split sharply. Supporters of the president described the move as an assertion of American strength. Critics, including former diplomats and retired military officials, called it one of the most damaging diplomatic errors in recent memory. One retired national security official described the walkout as the collapse of America's ability to convene allies under shared leadership. Republican and Democratic lawmakers alike demanded emergency briefings. Members of congressional foreign relations committees questioned whether the White House had considered the long-term strategic consequences of publicly isolating one of America's closest partners. The photograph that emerged from the summit tells the story more clearly than any statement. The American president seated alone at a circular table arranged for 7 leaders, 6 empty chairs, 6 unattended flags. The image has now appeared on magazine covers across Europe, North America, and Asia. It has been projected onto public buildings in several European capitals. It has been shared millions of times, and it has prompted a question that diplomatic experts are now debating openly. Can international alliances survive when member nations no longer believe the rules apply equally to everyone? The stability of institutions like the G7 depends on trust, procedure, and mutual respect between participating countries. Those 3 things are not written into any treaty. They cannot be enforced by any court. They exist because every member chooses, in every interaction, to honor them. The moment one member stops honoring them publicly, every other member must decide whether the institution is still worth protecting. 5 of them decided today. They decided in real time, on camera, in front of the world, in less than 4 minutes. And now the deeper question is not whether the G7 can survive this summit. It is whether the broader framework of Western cooperation, built over decades on the assumption that allied nations would treat each other as equals, can survive the precedent that was set in that room this morning. Rival powers are watching. Markets are watching. Allied governments are recalculating their relationships with Washington quietly, behind closed doors, in ways that will not become fully visible for months or years. But the image is already visible, and images, in the modern era, do not require interpretation. 6 empty chairs say everything that 7 leaders could not agree to put into writing. If this kind of analysis is what you have been looking for, subscribe to the Global Report right now and hit the bell icon. We publish twice a week. We go further than the headlines, every single time. You will not want to miss what comes next. This is the Global Report, the story behind the story, every time.